Okay, this plug. Yep, this working. Okay, it's wonderful to be with you all. I flew in from Phoenix to Miami at midnight and drove up today, and I'll go up to Vero next, and then I think I'm in a new city every day this week. But all in Florida, it's really nice. So I'm here to talk about the Berlin Letters, which released just last week, last Tuesday. And it is a chase of a story. It is a spy story, a love story, a story of family, forgiveness, friendship, sacrifice, punk rock, this code breaking, and the Berlin Wall. It was inspired by the Berlin Wall and a real CIA code breaking project called the Nutter Project. And I'll get to both of those, but I want to set the stage a little bit first. In today's geopolitical world, we have different hotspots. But during the Cold War, it was Berlin. Berlin was ground zero for international tensions. Nikita Khrushchev, first secretary of the Communist Party in 1963, Berlin is the testicle of the West. When I want the West to scream, I squeeze out Berlin. And that is dramatic and maybe inappropriate as that is, was absolutely true. That's what they did. They manipulated Berlin. And so, I'm going to talk a little bit about the history real quick. Because when the wall came up in 1961, just like a character in a fiction novel, we believe that a character needs to start in media res, which means in the middle of it. She or he has to be fully developed and step onto that stage. And even though the Berlin Wall came up in one night, August 13th, 1961, that is not the beginning of its story. The beginning of its story, for my purposes, began in 1945 at the Yalta Conference, when Stalin and Roosevelt and Churchill got together and they divided up Germany so that she wouldn't start another war. So they took Germany and they said, okay, Soviet Union, you get the East, Britain, America, France, you get the West. That's the obviously the green, yellow, and the blue. Well, Stalin came in 1945 faster than the others, and he created a barrier between what became East Germany and West Germany. But as you can see, Berlin is situated fully within the Soviet-occupied territory, and by the Yalta Agreement, he could not create a barrier in Berlin. Berlin, by the agreement, was to have full, but people could walk through all four sectors of the city without any hindrance. And most people really did. 65,000 people in 1969 lived in the Soviet sector and walked over to one of the three other sectors for their jobs. But what happened was, he also took a lot of the manufacturing and shipped it back to Moscow. He also instituted a planned economy. He destroyed Berlin, by the way, on his way in, before the other allies got there, because he wanted revenge. Remember, he and Hitler had been allies. Hitler turned against him, battled Stalingrad, one of the most vicious of World War II. Stalin wanted revenge, and he took it. So, by 1961, Walter Ulbricht, the head of the East German government, is suffering a failing economy and people fleeing in droves. From 1945 to 1961, 2.6 million East Germans went to Berlin, walked across the street, and escaped, because that was the escape hatch. The border between the countries was closed, but there was no border in Berlin. In fact, the month before the wall went up, 20,000 people walked across the street and disappeared forever. So Ulbricht kept asking Moscow, asking Khrushchev, can I build the wall? Can I shut this down? Kept saying no. But then he said yes. And on October 12, 1961, Operation Rose began. And in one night, he closed down the city. Well, what he did, we think about the wall as keeping the East in. But really, it circled West Berlin, 27 miles in between the Soviet sector and the other three, 69 miles around the city. West Berlin became an island and a communist state. And he shut down 193 roads, 68 crossings, 12 train stations, cut telephone lines. As I said, 65,000 people who went to work every Monday lost their jobs, but also families were torn apart. Because that first morning, when that barbed wire went up, families were divided over. That's a look at, look at the devastation. That is Stalin entering Berlin and just decimating the city. So this is a picture of that first morning, because that first morning it was coiled barbed wire. It was an awful wall that we have in our minds. This is the picture of the same couple. And if you noticed, she's holding the baby boy. She's passing into her husband, and basically she's saying goodbye. If she ever hugged her son again, the earliest time would have been 2.5 years later, because it took 2.5 years before the East German government allowed West Berliners to come into East Berlin for a single day pass to see family members. So families were divided instantly. About 800 people that first day did get across, just as that little boy did. But after that, those numbers dropped dramatically. One place, before we get there, about 60 soldiers also got across that first day. That's the most famous picture on your right. That's Conrad Schumann. And we jumped over the wall, jumped over the barricade that first day. And in the book, in the very first prologue, there's a boy in blue shorts you'll read about. And this story is true. I do not believe he's this boy, but I read a story about a little boy in blue shorts. I imagine that this boy's shorts are blue. But anyway, so when you read in the prologue about a thin boy in blue shorts, that's just who I was thinking of. But there was some buildings on Bernauerstrasse that were unique. The wall was set back about 10 feet within the Soviet sector, so that Western allies really couldn't have anything to say about it. It wasn't on their land. But at Bernauerstrasse, the buildings were in the Soviet sector, but the very first step into the sidewalk was in the French sector. So that first morning, many people walked out their front door and never returned. As you can see, they collected trash bags and suitcases. Well, within days, those doors were bricked up, and they started doing the first floor windows so that people were eventually jumping from the second and third floors to get out. But that also doesn't last long because, as I said, they bricked them all up and they started moving people out as they brought in the cement. And this actually is the wall on Bernauerstrasse, and you can see it dead ends into the building, and that will continue on the other side of the building. But this is the wall that we imagine. This is the wall that we remember. But this is actually the fourth iteration of the walls. In 1977, these are 3 police officers testing out that smooth metal, it's not metal, but the smooth piping you see across the top of the wall. And they believed it was very effective, so by 1980, they had put in this final iteration of the wall. And this is, if you were on the western side, this is what you saw, the graffiti on the wall. But if you were on the eastern side, you saw something very different. You first saw a 6-foot wall. You then saw strips of sand. You then saw trenches filled with metal shards called Huxburn, or devil's dragon's teeth, that tear you to shreds if you got through. Now, we don't see it, but there also, you saw patrol stations. In the 1980s, the wall was guarded by 10,000 submachine guns, 2,300 patrol cars, and kind of what else. And it cost $1 billion to maintain annually. So it's therefore an endeavor. But it's also, to keep the East Germans in line, they had 270,000 Stasi officers. And I know you all heard about the KGB. You probably heard about the Stasi. This is Erich Mielke, who was the head of the Stasi for most of its 1945 to 1991 time period. But he was the head of the Stasi, and the Stasi was ruthless. It was formed and fashioned after the KGB. Now, the Stasi and the KGB were never meant to protect the people. A state security's function is only to protect the state, even if that meant from the people. And the Stasi was brilliant, actually, at information. Gathering information, utilizing it, storing it, weaponizing it. And they did so with 1.5 million Spexels, which were confidential informants, or you would say snitches. And that meant that by the 1980s, 1 in every 8 East German citizens was collaborating with the Stasi, was reporting on their neighbors. And when the Stasi documents became public by law in 1992, many people went and got their files and found that their brother, their uncle, 3 neighbors, and 2 friends had been reporting to Stasi on them that whole time. And Harris, Luisa's father, Luisa's the protagonist now, I'll do about for a second. Luisa's father, Harris, will take you behind the wall during that time, from the day it goes up to the day it comes down, and share with you a little bit about life behind the wall and the Stasi. But if you're going to have a story that involves the Berlin Wall, you have to have information getting out. Now, we take it for granted today with tiny microchips, satellite phones, and everything, that that's easy to accomplish. But none of that existed in 1961. And so when I started this story, I was inspired by the women of the Venona Project. So the Venona Project was a top-secret code-breaking project CIA ran from 1933 until 1980. It began in 43 because although the U.S. was entering the war in 41, we had only been reading Axis mail. We didn't read the secret communiques with allies. But in 43, a military intelligence officer, his name was Carter Cook, he did not believe he should trust Joseph Stalin, and he wanted to peek into his mailbag. So he hired Jane Reveal, a Virginia math teacher, and asked her to craft the code and reading the Soviet secret communiques. They were all based on math, reading really extraordinary math. And her team, primarily of women, started working on those codes. And they kept going back to those same codes, World War II, and the early Cold War years, and digging into them deeper and deeper. And we know a lot of the names spies they uncovered. Julian Stenzel Rosenberg, Spaz Fuse, Guy Burgess and Don Cambridge 5, including extra information about Ken Stilby, along with Alger Hiss and Soviet infiltration into the Manhattan Project and more. But, it's Women's History Month, we don't know their names, and they were extraordinary women. Jane Reveal, Josephine Miller, Kara Gary, Miriam Bosky, Nana Brad, Gordon Forbes, Doris Johnson, Rugi Roy, Juanita McCutcheon, Rose Brown, and Bess and Anne Gudinati. These women kept their secrets, and none of them taught. Angeline Nani finally gave an interview in 2018, the year before she died in 2019, and she was the last of those original women to pass away. Gave an interview in 2018, and that's where I got some of my information about, what they did, how they did it, how they were hired, how they became friends, and really they dedicated their lives to this work. The Venona Project files became public in 1994. But in writing the Berlin letters, because the Berlin letters takes place in 1 week time, the first week of November 1989, I envision a Venona 2. A CIA officer decides there is still more information to be gleaned from those early Cold War secret messages. So he hires 4 women, brilliant at math. He puts them off-site, just as those women were. They were off-site in Arlington. In fact, 4 presidents did not know that this project existed within their presidency. So they're off-site, and they're still cracking into those old codes. And that is where Louisa Bochler stumbles across a symbol that reminds her of a childhood memory, which sends her to another cache of letters where she defines codes that leads to the understanding that her father is not dead, as she's been told, but he's languishing in the Stasi prison. So the Berlin letters takes Louisa from Washington, D.C., on an impetuous ride over to Berlin to try and break her father out of that Stasi prison, right as the Berlin Wall falls. So that is a little bit about the Berlin letters. It is my 11th story, and I know them all really well. So if you have any questions about any others, I'm happy to share those too. And I think I talked really fast. I'm sorry. I'm looking at the time, and it usually takes me 5 minutes longer to get through that, and I didn't skip any material. So one screen, what on earth I did. Sorry. Anyways, but so I do hope you have questions, because there's so much about this time period that is incredibly rich. I did use the wall really as a character within the story, as I said, but it also frames the story. The story clearly does begin the day the wall goes up, and it ends the day the wall goes down. So it's both structure and character. don't realize everything else.
What was it about that era and that part of the world that attracted you?
The book prior to this, Shadow of Moscow, is about a CIA operative and an MI6 operative, two women working in Moscow, sort of trying to keep away from KGB, circling each other, and then when Aldrich Ames hands his first list of Western assets to the KGB, they have to try to escape alive. In doing the research to that, which spans from 1955 to 1985, I tapped the breadth of Cold War history. I mean, I read so much. And there was so much that was not applicable to Moscow. For instance, you didn't mention the Berlin Wall, but there's no need. It wasn't over there. It was like, yep, we're protecting our people. That's how it was told, by the way. It was the anti-fascist protection barrier. It was to keep their people pure, probably from us. I got it. Yeah. So anyway, but there were so many fascinating stories, and the idea of the wall too, and intrigued me. Could I make it both structure and character? That was incredibly intriguing. And then when I discovered the Manogren Project, that took it all together. I had the whole story. And a weird ago, there's some amazing things about it all and about the Stasi. They were the KGB's information. And we take it for granted now, but think about how mind-blowing it would have been to discover it. In 1982, there was a Stasi operation called Operation Hope, and that operation was to send out disinformation to point the finger away from the Soviet Union for ordering the kit on Ready to. That would have brought down the world. But, that was made public in 2005. So it's just crazy stuff that don't really know about. That's extraordinary good start.
Yeah, we're so used to the movies and books of the glamorous spies, except for, but yeah. But what were you finding real spies like?
I actually said it in A Shadow of Moscow. One of my spies said, spying is a whole lot of nothing wrapped around a little something. Now, that doesn't mean that the nothing isn't dangerous. It's all dangerous. But in fact, I also wrote an article with a former CIA spy, and it would be, if Hollywood portrayed it as it really is, it'd be so boring. Because it's all preparation. It's all background stuff. And you might have that little moment of tension, but if you have that little moment of tension, you've almost never gone. You're supposed to do it so that nobody sees a thing ever. So it's really interesting. It was fun to write that article with her about it. But that is what I discovered, that there's tension all the time. It's terrifying, but if somebody notices anything, that's when it's wrong.
When you were creating your spy characters, what is it about a person that wants to be a spy?
Many things. Many things. I think and I kind of explored this also in Shadow of Moscow. If you want to be a spy for the money, you're going to get caught and killed. It's not a deep enough reason. You know what I mean? But if you have some ideological drive, such as you believe you really can make the world a better place, then you might be a little more creative. You sacrifice a little more. We have a chance to say a lot a little longer. But either way, incredibly dangerous profession. But I think most people enter it wanting to either stick it to their home country or because they believe in the other side. Like Tolkachev, Adolf Tolkachev, the king from the Soviet, was a engineer in the Soviet military lab in the 1980s, and he truly believed that to end the idea of global armament, that he needed to share with the U.S. what the Soviet military was doing. So truly believed that it had to end by sharing with the U.S.
And you're both your characters and that same viewpoint that they're going to save the world, or how did you do it?
My characters do it for much more personal reasons. Let's see. In this one, she wants to save her father. It's very clear. She's code breaking, almost as an analytical exercise. because the Venota Project, remember, worked on old codes. This is 1989, and she's still decoding things from the 40s. So those are old codes. They bring to light new information. So that's analytical. But when she decides to go over, she's not going over necessarily to spy. She's going over there for a jailbreak. In A Shadow of Moscow, one wanted to make a better world for her daughter, and the other couldn't live with the lie. The KGB killed her best friend, and she couldn't live with the lie about what was really happening to her country. So she went to the CIA.
Sorry. A Shadow in Moscow. When you brought up the name of Aldrich Ames, I couldn't believe, he was so high up and so respected and so well thought of. And you could, that's fun, right? And how many lives?
Oh, they say hundreds. From 1985 to 1994, he was not caught until 94. And they say hundreds of lives.
And he was able to stay undercover that almost 10 years.
Huh? All the things at the time was the head of the CIA, Soviet Union, Eastern European desk. He was just pointing a finger at other people. It was finally, hang on, come on. My memory, seriously, I've got all these names in there. 2 women who finally brought him down, following the money. And they wrote a book on it called Aldrich Ames, Circle of Treason, Jean Vertful, and Sandra Grimes. I was looking for love letters now, and I can tell you all these ones. Yeah, it was remarkable. I mean, terrifying. He did it for the money. He was all in it for the money. He had very expensive taste. He was an alcoholic. His wife had very expensive taste, and he amassed about $14 million from Reay KGB.
And all of it, and then
he is in Terre Haute, Indiana, in prison.
You still?
Is it that what you're still in your, actually?
Yes.
It was, I did business in Berlin in the mid-80s.
Mm-hmm.
And the wall was really an eerie place. It was very scary, or you would stand looking out at the Spree River, and the Russians would be in the gunboat, and they'd wave to you. And you would wave to them and the night before, 2 people were killed trying to cross. And they would put white crosses. Anytime someone was killed crossing the Spree River, they would put a cross and date it and then put a flower.
And would the soldiers take that away?
Well, the crosses were put on the west side.
I was about to say, because on the east side, if you died trying to cross the wall, you were not allowed to have a public funeral. You had to tell people, your daughter died in a car accident, had a mishap.
Oh, I believe that.
Yeah, you could not have a public funeral. Yeah.
Oh, absolutely.
It was eerie. Yeah,
Yeah.
and that ever-present, ever-pervasive feeling of being watched.
Yeah, the one that happened the night before I was there, he died on the west. He was shot going over the wall. He fell on the west side.
Was that Peter? I don't remember his last name. It was one of the most famous.
I have to be honest, the years passed.
Everybody was watching on either side, and they let him bleed out on the east. His friend made it over. I think his name was Peters, one of the most famous. His friend made it over the wall, and he was shot climbing up and fell.
Yeah, that was the one. Yeah.
Okay, and they let him bleed out right there. And soldiers on both sides were watching this. I mean, the stories are really horrible.
I mean, and driving in it, when you were in East Berlin, when you would drive through East Berlin to get to the city of Berlin, there would be a checkpoint, and you'd have to take your suitcases out of your car. You'd have to go to the checkpoint area. You'd have to they would open up your suitcase, check everything. Any printed material they would confiscate. I would always have newspapers. They would always confiscate anything printed in the West. They would always confiscate.
Yeah.
Why were the 2 walls? The Americans at the wall was in the Westerners that would walk. He showed 2 walls.
Oh, no. We had no walls. Hang on, let me go back here. So this is the wall that you see from the west, and this is what we call the wall. Is it the 10-foot? But what we often didn't see in the west was over the wall. So if you live in the east, you never got near this wall. You had a 6-foot wall Then you had sands, you had guards, you had metal shards, you had huge metal spikes, and then the final was the 10-foot wall. And sometimes, if you remember, the Brandenburg Gate was in this they called it the buffer strip, or we called it the death strip. The Brandenburg Gate was inside it, and so is a very famous church that was built in the 1800s called the Church of Reconciliation, that they finally blew up. It was in the death strip, and they blew up in 1985, right before Berlin's 750th anniversary, because the wall didn't look so good. They were getting flack globally about having a church called the Church of Reconciliation and sitting forlorn and abandoned in the death strip.
I had no idea. You explained that beautifully in the book, but I had no idea that they had to cross all that.
Yes, they had to cross all that.
Wow.
And until about 1982, when East Germany could not pay the $1 billion for its annual maintenance, and they had to borrow it from West Germany, they had automatic firing rifles. West Germany said, "We will not give you the $1 billion unless you take down the auto firing rifles." Very serious about keeping these. Then,
I'm a fan of the top row.
oh yeah,
I love it. Okay, this is very much the pressure, but kind of writing. Is this the kind of writing you've always wanted to do? Or just you want to do something different?
You know, I all turn into better bookshop spots. Bottom line is, I don't have writing I've always wanted to do. The book I write is the book I've always wanted to write. Do you know what I mean? I love what I write when I write it. In the Print of Bookshop, it is a story, contemporary novel about 3 women at very different times in their lives, coming together in an independent bookstore, and through mishaps, mayhem, and misadventure, becoming friends, and hopefully saving the bookstore. But beneath that fun is the reality that none of these 3 women is living her best life. They're either living in the past, where they were once happy, or imagining a future where she thinks she'll be happy someday, that can't live involved in the present. And that led me to this thought that we are affected indelibly by our past, whether it's collectively or individually. And that led me to the London House. The London House is a split-time story, and there's a secret in a family that happened in the early days of World War II, which of course involved spies, because that's fun, and fashion, but secret that happened in the early days of World War II, and it has shadowed this family for 80 years. And we looked at the present-day heroine, Carolyn Payne, to uncover that secret and find out where that would be for her family. But I wanted the reader and Carolyn to uncover it together. Have it not be backstory, have it not be memory, have it not be in that subjective lens of, misinterpretation of letters between her grandmother and her aunt, and that's now being touched the past. So that's why it took me to historical fiction. At the moment, I'm just having fun. But who knows? I thought about, I did have a book entitled in my head called My Boston Year, and it was about a woman who goes through Boston. I may still write it. So any other question?
So the most recent outage spy was an American ambassador who was spying for Cuba. Maybe Havana into Mexico?
No, London 1973 art forgery is my next one. So I'm leaving the spy wars behind. Moving on to that next thing that's captured my interest. Yes.
What is your research process like for the historical fiction thing? I know the fiction part is like the moving up, but now basically there's a lot of research in it.
Yeah.
Or like how long was that take?
There's a ton of research in it, and before I write a single word, I need to know who these characters are. And to understand who these characters are, I need to understand the world they live in. So prior to writing anything, I will read all the fiction of the time, like pretty much all the John le Carré novels, which, by the way, Smiley's nemesis is KGB Carla. He was not based on a KGB officer. He was based on Stasi spy master Marcus Wolf. There's a right there. Anyway, So all Frederick Forsyth, lots of spy novels from that period. And also all of the nonfiction I just get my hands on. From my library, I would get stacks and stacks of books on first the Cold War in general, then Berlin specifically. That's how I was introduced to punk rock in East Berlin, which was amazing. There's a little bit of punk rock in the book. And so once I understand the world, then I can start to place people within the world because I'm beginning to understand how they think. And only then. Born in Berlin, I also spent 6 days in Berlin just racing around that city as Louisa did. And what was really remarkable is I could tell from Google Maps that, say, Stellenallee, which became Karl Marx Allee, led straight to the Fenestrum, which is that huge, iconic, TV tower that you see in Berlin. And I knew that that was a straight line. But only standing there did I realize, oh my goodness, I am standing on the boulevard of Soviet power. Like when they built that street, it is huge buildings that lead straight to tree-lined roads, straight to the Fenestrum. I mean, it was a display of power. But now, if you go 2 blocks off that street, and it is nothing like that. But that's where the tourists were allowed to go. And it is impressive. And so you don't get that from Google Maps, that feeling of, oh my goodness, this is empire stuff. So it was really interesting to do that too.
Oh, I'm wondering if you're visiting Russia today, do they welcome you?
I don't know. I visited Russia today. I was in Moscow and Leningrad in 1985. And no, they did not book much. But
I mean, was I present writing?
oh, I don't know. I don't believe my book is translated into Russian. They don't do that well. So, I do not get a royalty check for a Russian translation. No, I think it's not. Anything else?
Did you have a problem getting into Russia in 85?
Did I then?
Did you have a problem getting into Moscow in 85?
I did not have a problem, but our passports were handed over. We was followed at every moment. We were told to leave behind all jewelry. I mean, we were befouled. So did we have a problem getting over? No. Did we have any freedom there? No. Hotel rooms bugged. We were told they would be, if you knew they were. So maybe somewhat like their experience in East Germany.
Sure.
Yeah, it was very gray.
Yeah.
The Berlin is very gray.
That's fascinating. But are you at Gorky Park? Did you read?
Oh, I read Gorky Park and I was around there, yes. And there was another really interesting thing is I had to, and it was a little less so in Berlin, but when I was doing the Moscow book, I had to make sure I read things prior to 1991 and the fall of the Soviet Union because all the park names changed, street names changed, city names changed. Everything changed post 91. And so it was really interesting to make sure my research was prior to those photos. Like I should have looked at maps today. The street names are all different. So I'd find old maps.
So,
2000.
Well, oh, yeah. I have a more personal question. Thinking about your body of work, and I've read most of them. But also remembering that you had 3 children. I don't know where they are now. If they're all out of the house when you had a kid, or where they were when you first doubled, and how you balance the writing with the living.
Probably not. Okay, so when I published my first novel in 2013, my youngest was 11. My oldest is 21 now. So I've been doing this almost 11 years. So when the kids were young, I wrote when the bus left for school and I stopped when the bus came back. And what I also did is I saved all the chores for when they were home. So when they were home, they saw me folding laundry, doing dishes, and the your mind works. Like I love me because I'm working. So I saved all that kind of info when they were home. Then when they started, driving, then I had 3 o'clock until 6 o'clock. So in a way, I have to be honest with you, it's almost easier when they were in-house because there was this cadence of light. It was so structured. Now, They are all, I have 2 girls who will graduate college this year, and my son is older, he's 26. Not a, and I have to really guard my writing time, is I have a 9-month-old creatine puppy who absorbed in a hole. And if I researched him. Yeah, my husband thought that was a great idea. I'm going to love it. The husband and the puppy. He's 140 pounds. Already. He's been for about 2 weeks. Oh my God. Insane. Absolutely insane. But here, I'll tell you one more thing about the crazy puppy. So I've been married for over 30 years. We've had many, many dogs, and we've moved like many, many times. But I never had a dog who loved me best. One loves Mary Margaret, my youngest, absolutely adores her best. Everybody else loves my husband best. You know, maybe he feeds them, I don't know, just have fun, and no idea. So this dog comes into the house, and I'm like, warning to everyone, this dog will love me best. And so I did all the training, I do all the feeding, I do everything for this dog, and he loves me best. And I'm on tour for a month, and I said to my husband, if I come home and he loves you best, we will have words. So don't be too kind to him. He's in the eye. It's honestly, 140-pound 9-month-old puppy is not worth the work if he doesn't love me best. Right. So such is life. There's life.
And I actually have a question. All of the historic, like Berlin content that I've kind of consumed has shown that the agents that were working for the Soviets were oftentimes treated terribly. Is that something you found?
Everybody who worked for the Soviets was treated terribly. No. And I'm not being flippant. I'm being serious. You have to remember something about a communist system, and the Soviet system in particular, that your value as a human being is your utility to the state. Like, I'm sorry, there's no getting around that. That is an actual fact. And so, they were only as valuable as they were useful. And that means you can almost do anything to a human. And they did. And I'm talking about their hockey players, their gymnasts, their spies. That is absolutely the reality.
I heard like they're like artists too, like ballet.
Anybody.
Yeah.
You are only as useful, you are only valued in your utility. Standing else, that's a note to end on, isn't it?
A lot of the Russian tennis players are always caught drug doping. Yeah, the Russian tennis players are professionals. All eventually. The figure skating. Because do they even know? They probably don't even know, do they?
Even if they know, they have no choice about it.
Yeah.
I mean, this is what you do. The Stasi, it was very interesting. You know, the Stasi, people say, well, how could they snitch on their neighbors? Well, they were very clever. The Stasi went brilliant at something called decomposition. That was what they called it. It had a great German name. I can't speak German. But decomposition happened not in jail. It happened outside of jail. And what they would do is, you'd make a mistake at work that you made. Your wife would get demoted. Your kids would get kicked out of the communist club. And if you got kicked out of the communist club, your utility was much lower. Your privileges were much lower. It was a huge deal. You had friends who would turn their back on you because they suspect you. You would do anything for the Stasi to make the confusion or the pain stop. And if you didn't, then they would arrest your kid. They'd fire your wife. And by the way, if you didn't have a job, they had these called the antisocial laws. It's antisocial was voted or something. If you didn't have a job within 2 weeks, you could go to jail. Everyone had to work. So if Stasi got you fired, you were in panic for 2 weeks to get it. So you would do what they said. Things got you in every different direction. Listen to 1 in 8. And you'll see in the book, Alice Louisa, racist too, saved her father. You will find there are friends and foes and punks and betrayal and all sorts of things in that little bit of time. And all of it does have with humanity in the sense that very few, though some did, ideologically follow the Stasi, others were compromised in ways that were so painful. And so all of that exists within the Brink letters. And I will tell you, banding, the wall comes down. But But one scene out here I had so much fun writing. There's one scene at the very end of the book where the words spoken are exactly the same. The path through Berlin is exactly the same. But one is from the Lisa, an Americanist point of view, and one is from Paris's, an East German's point of view. And they see these moments and interpret their feelings. Everything is so different. It was really a lot of fun to write because no one in East Germany expected that wall to come down. Now, we know that there were velvet revolutions all over Europe, but that wall came down by accident. And you can watch the YouTube video. So, Guter Schabowski was a Politburo member on that evening, November 9th, 1989, and he wasn't even to announce it then. He received a piece of paper during a press conference. He was to announce it actually the next morning, but he announced it at the press conference. He was to say that the East German government was allowing more lenient passport restrictions. You were going to be allowed with proper papers to leave the country for 1 month a year. That's what he was supposed to announce. Instead, he looks in the paper for the first time, and he's like, well, the borders are open. And an Italian, on YouTube, you can watch this, an Italian journalist says, whoa, could you clarify that? What do you mean the borders are open? When are the borders open? He goes, yes, they are open. Immediately. And people start flooding to the walls. No guard knew what was going on. The first wall opened, the first gate opened on, it's in the book because I had them at that gate, opened without even permission because there were so many thousands of people there. They didn't know what to do. They just opened it about 11 p.m. And then they got the word from on high, open call. But crazy night. Egon Krenz, the head of the East German state, had just said in January, this wall will last 50 years, 100 years, however long it is required. And no one expected to find that.
What happened to that man and who?
Gunter Schabowski?
Yeah.
I have no idea.
Not imagining the rest.
I do think he did have to retire. I need to follow up on that. Because as I said, with this book stopping on November 9th, 1989, I didn't even look at what happened to Gunter. Because I had to do that, because if you start researching beyond, then I start presuming knowledge. You know what I mean? And so I really made a hard stop on that night, because, German unification. Nobody knew that was going to be happening. So I really had to really...
He's probably hired in the Gulag.
Yeah, good. For them.
Good.
Well, thank you all so much for coming. I will tell you, it is my birthday. And it is the